Anonymous sources are not automatically lies, but they are also not proof. The moment a story relies on unnamed sources, the reader loses key information needed to judge credibility. In the next few minutes, I'll explain why anonymous sources shape headlines so powerfully, what they can mean, and how to read them without being pushed into manufactured certainty. We're doing this in 5 parts. Part 1, what anonymous sources actually are. Part 2, why newsrooms and tabloids use them. Part 3, how they change headline wording and audience certainty. Part 4, what you can and cannot verify as a viewer. Part 5, a simple checklist you can use on every story. 1. What anonymous sources are. An anonymous source is someone whose identity is deliberately kept hidden from the public. In some instances, journalists know exactly who the source is and can verify their credibility internally, but they choose not to reveal the name for legal, ethical, or safety reasons. In other cases, the sourcing is less concrete, the journalist may not fully know the origin of the information, or the claim may have passed through multiple intermediaries before reaching the reporter. Either way, anonymity creates a situation in which the audience is asked to trust a claim without being given the tools to independently evaluate it. This is why you often see phrases like, "a source says," "insiders claim," "a friend revealed," "a palisade said," or "sources close to." While these phrases are meant to signal inside knowledge, they are not evidence on their own. They do not show documentation, recordings, or other verifiable proof. Instead, they are essentially a request for trust, asking the audience to accept the claim based solely on the credibility of the outlet or the authority implied by the unnamed source. Anonymous sourcing can be essential in certain contexts. It protects whistleblowers who expose wrongdoing, ensures safety for people at risk, and allows information to surface that otherwise might remain hidden. But it also introduces a gap. That gap is where narratives can grow, often in ways that amplify uncertainty or create the impression of authority without verification. Without knowing the source's identity, the audience cannot evaluate potential bias, understand the source's access to the events, gauge their motive for sharing information, or assess their track record for accuracy. This uncertainty becomes fertile ground for stories to take on a life of their own. Once a claim is out in the public sphere, especially when repeated by multiple outlets, it can start to feel like established fact, even if the underlying sourcing is weak. The anonymity gives it a veneer of credibility while simultaneously preventing scrutiny. Readers and viewers are left to fill in the gaps themselves, often relying on assumptions about the source or the media outlet's reputation. The problem is compounded in fast-moving media environments. Viral stories, social media shares, and reaction-driven coverage can take a single anonymous claim and spread it widely before any verification is possible. In these situations, the claim's insider framing becomes more powerful than the evidence, shaping public perception and influencing discussions. The combination of perceived authority, mystery, and repeated circulation allows narratives to solidify in the collective imagination, even when the underlying facts are not confirmed. Anonymous sources occupy a double-edged position. They are critical tools for investigative journalism and for protecting individuals, but they also introduce uncertainty that can be exploited by narratives, misunderstandings, or sensationalist reporting. Recognizing the limits of what an anonymous claim can tell us and the ways in which it can be amplified is essential for anyone trying to interpret news critically and separate verified facts from untested assertions. 2. Why outlets use anonymous sources. There are legitimate reasons. Protection. Someone could lose a job or face harassment if named. Access. Some stories are only possible if sources feel safe speaking privately. Verification behind the scenes. In strong journalism, editors require the reporter to explain how the information was obtained and sometimes confirm with multiple independent sources. But there are also incentives that are less noble. Speed. Anonymous sourcing can be fast because it allows a story to be published without waiting for official documents, confirmation, or formal statements. This speed can give outlets a competitive edge, letting them report developments as they happen, but it comes at the cost of verifiability and accountability. Narrative control. When a claim is unattributed, it can be presented or framed more flexibly. If the claim is later challenged, The outlet can simply say it was reported or according to sources, rather than asserting it as verified fact. This allows the story to circulate widely while avoiding direct responsibility for accuracy. Plausible deniability. If a story turns out to be wrong, unnamed sources can never be held publicly accountable because their identities remain hidden. In high-profile coverage, like celebrity or royal news, anonymous sourcing is especially common because it's effective. It creates the appearance of insider knowledge and click-worthy certainty, all without the journalist having to provide full proof or face the risk of accountability. This makes such stories compelling, but also inherently less verifiable. 3. How anonymous sources shape headlines. Now we get to the part most people feel but do not name. Anonymous sourcing changes headlines in predictable ways. 1. It upgrades suggestion into certainty. An article might include cautious language, but the headline goes bolder. Why? Because headlines sell and the fine print does not. 2. It creates implied authority. Insider is a powerful word because it suggests special access or authority, but in practice, it can mean almost anything. It could refer to someone who worked at a company years ago, a casual acquaintance, a friend of a friend, or even a carefully timed strategic leak. Without concrete details about who the insider is and what they actually know, the authority the term implies is assumed rather than proven. The label alone does not guarantee reliable information. 3. It creates a story you cannot fully challenge. If you cannot see or identify the source, you have no way to directly evaluate the claim's accuracy. Without access to the source, you cannot check their credibility, motives, or the information they provided. In such cases, all you are left with is opinion or speculation, judging the people involved rather than the claim itself. This is why relying solely on anonymous sources or unverified reports is risky. True verification requires evidence or testimony that can be examined, cross-checked, and corroborated. Otherwise, you're making decisions based on assumptions, impressions, or feelings, not on facts. Even repeated reports from the same unnamed source cannot substitute for independent confirmation. That is why anonymous sourcing is fuel for polarization. It turns debate into identity, not evidence. 4. It encourages repetition. Other outlets repeat the story because it already exists, and repetition becomes perceived truth, even if the original sourcing was weak. So a single anonymous claim can become the foundation of a public narrative within hours. 4. What you can and cannot verify. If you cannot independently check a claim, you cannot treat it as settled or proven. You can still consider it possible or use it as a lead to investigate further, but it should not be treated as fact. So the question becomes, what can you verify? Look for things you can confirm through reliable sources, direct evidence, documentation, or multiple independent reports. Only verified information should be treated as established. You can verify named sources, direct quotes, official statements, on-the-record interviews. You can verify documents, court filings, judgments, press releases, publicly accessible records. You can verify consistency. If multiple independent outlets with strong reporting standards confirm the same information, that generally increases its reliability and suggests the story has been thoroughly checked. However, when a story relies on unnamed or anonymous sources, there is no way to independently verify the source's identity, motives, access to information, or overall credibility. This lack of transparency introduces uncertainty about the accuracy of the claims. For this reason, stories built mainly on anonymous sources should be considered provisional. This doesn't mean the information is false, but rather that the reader doesn't have enough evidence to treat it as a confirmed fact. Critical readers should approach such reports with caution, looking for additional verification or context before accepting the claims as fully reliable. 5. A simple checklist for reading anonymous sourcing. Here is the method you can use every time. Step 1. Count how many claims rely on unnamed sources. If most of the story is anonymous claims, treat it as weak. Step 2. Look for independent confirmation. Is there a document, an on-the-record quote? A second outlet confirming independently. Step 3. Watch the verbs. Reported, claimed, alleged, suggested. Those words matter. They are legal and editorial signals. Step 4, separate 3 layers. Claim, evidence, outcome. Step 5, watch for corrections. If the story changes quietly later, that tells you something about the stability of the original sourcing. This is the point of media literacy, not cynicism. Discipline. You are not required to believe every anonymous story, and you are not required to dismiss it either. You are required to hold it at the correct level of certainty. Anonymous sources can be legitimate, but they reduce what the audience can verify. They shape headlines because they provide implied authority, fast publishing, and stories that spread before evidence catches up. So the viewer rule is simple. Treat anonymous claims as claims, look for documents and on-record confirmation, and always separate claim, evidence, outcome. If you want more media literacy breakdowns like this, subscribe and check the Headline Mechanics playlist. And comment with a headline you want analysed next, one claim at a time.